Do 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 do.
Welcome to part 3.
Part 3. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Biblia is Metal. How do you say metal in Spanish?
Why are you asking me?
I don't know.
You're half Mexican.
Yes, but
Your dad speaks Spanish.
no, he doesn't.
Wait, seriously?
So here's the unfortunate truth. We're just going right into this. So my grandparents used Spanish as their secret language. So when one of their children was going to get the chancla anytime soon, they were speaking in Spanish. So my dad and his siblings knew they were in trouble when mom and dad were speaking in Spanish.
Oh, wow.
And so they never learned Spanish. I mean, I think some of my aunts and uncles, they learned Spanish later, but it wasn't like they learned it from childhood.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And so my dad knows nothing of Spanish.
That's so interesting.
And so thus I never learned Spanish.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because, I get all this mail and email and stuff in Spanish because people say, oh, he's a Gonzales. He knows Spanish.
He's Gonzales.
Yeah. And I can roll my R's perfectly,
Yeah.
but I can't use that ability.
I mean, my
to actually-
Spanish is pretty good. One of the guys at work has been helping me, with my Spanish. And,
yeah.
last time I was in Mexico, I was actually able to, carry on a conversation about, engineering stuff with a dude.
That's
It was
cool.
one of the engineers that was working there from Mexico, But yeah, no, I don't know what metal is in Spanish. I
Anyway,
feel like I should,
yeah. So
but
welcome to the Biblia is Metal.
Natalia.
And we,
That sounded Italian. That was bad.
yeah, it's all good.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Yeah.
¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
There we go. Something like that. Anyway, dude, this is the third episode that we have new intro music, and we have not talked about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we never really talked about our intro music at all. We got a message from a lady, and she's like, wow, I love your intro music, which made me feel really good because I write all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, Levi helps.
Yeah. I mean, I did play the drums for the first one.
The first one, yeah. I know. I was basically kind of getting into the tapping into my my Lamb of God.
Yeah.
And honestly, kind of when the more I listen yeah, so I was trying to get into the more I listen to it, wow, this actually sounds a lot like Laid to Rest. But
Laid to
yeah,
Rest.
which is one of the coolest drum intros ever.
Yeah. I totally did a dishonor to Randy Blythe right there.
Yeah. Yeah, so but this last one I was really bored. I was just thinking around in my gross basement studio. And I have my drum set down here. And I try to record stuff, but I really need a new kick head, and I cannot make the kick sounds good no matter what I do down here. So,
because I technically did record the drums for that part, but then because we couldn't get the kick to sound good enough.
no, I just replaced it all with I am admitting defeat. I feel like I'm admitting defeat as a recording, but a wannabe recording engineer, but I replaced everything with samples,
Yeah.
and I feel so bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really, because it sounds really good.
It sounds really good. I enjoyed it when you sent me the finalized copy.
Yeah.
It was so good. I played it over and over. It
Yeah,
was this sounds so good.
I was so happy with how it turned out, and they're just and so when I finally someone's like, "Who writes your intro music?" I'm just like, "I do." Oh my gosh, thank you.
It was me.
Someone noticed. Noticed me, senpai. And I mean, to be fair, I mean, also the samples I used to record it. I didn't time align them, which is a sin. So I hand drew all of them in there, so there's still a little bit of enough variation where it doesn't feel robotic. I feel like, but also I borrowed Matt Halpern, for the drummer from Periphery, and Nolly, who is a genius recording engineer, British man who looks like Levi. He's beautiful and bald and has a majestic beard,
Mhm.
and he makes pretty music.
Nice.
So they released when Periphery released their third album, they also released like a drum sample pack with like 3 of Matt's kits and a bunch of his cymbals and stuff. So I've been
And his kit just sounds gorgeous.
oh my gosh, it sounds so good. And part of that is just Nolly's ability as a recording engineer, because he's a dude who mixed My Own Grave. Like if you ever listen to that compared to their other stuff on the album, it is like it's noticeably better. Like he's just an unbelievably like talented. He has such a good ear for recording.
I just burped.
I could tell. I wasn't gonna mention
Probably
it.
could hear that.
I wasn't gonna mention it.
I
didn't want to be
flying
weird.
out of my gullet.
I'm sitting there. It's like, hey man, why are you like burping on my podcast? Anyway, yeah, new intro music was really good. I really enjoyed it. It actually, like, at some point, I'm starting to get to the point where it's like I actually kind of want to start like doing my own, like, my side music project. I'm trying to tap into my more guitar stuff. I need a better bass too, because that bass it was given to me for free by someone who had owned it for 30 years and never replaced the strings. So I replaced the strings and it still sounds like crap, but that's okay.
Yep.
So anyway, let me know what you think about the intro music. I really like it because it's like my baby. I'm happy with how it turned out.
It is pretty great. Like
So-
I thought our first intro music was good,
Yeah.
but I'm glad we upped it
Yeah.
and went to
This
the next
this
level.
next one we may have to go like full blast beat for 10 seconds.
Yes, I so badly want to do that.
I
Like,
don't
let
even-
me record that part.
I will happily let you record that part. I just need to replace. Well, your kick actually sounds pretty good, so we could probably go with that.
Like, if anything, we can bring my drum set
Into the
And-
basement.
and into the basement. I mean, I know that's gonna be hard because your drum set's like kind of wedged in the corner there.
Yeah. I mean, it's not only am I wedged in the corner, so literally my basement is maybe 600 square feet.
Yeah,
It's not big.
Yeah,
And I'm also sharing space with a staircase, a hot water heater, a furnace, and an 88 key rolling keyboard from the 90s.
sure.
So that actually sounds amazing.
And
so,
a computer and
a computer desk and a mixer, and
Yep.
yeah, it's not a big space.
It's a pretty cramped
I think we
space.
posted pictures online. Like
Yeah.
it's not comfortable.
yeah. I don't know.
I
We'll
like
figure,
it.
We'll figure something out.
It's kind of my hovel. It's my happy hovel. When I get home from work and I'm stressed out, I come down here and hit drums and play guitar and
That's fun.
write music and stuff. It's really nice. So.
That's fun.
And I'm so removed. That's the nice thing about soundproofing everything is I'm so removed from the outside world that I can just kind of like inner peace and keep my murderous thoughts to myself.
Keep your depravity to yourself.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so what are we talking about today?
So today we are going to be talking about the next 3 plagues in
The
our
next 3
Exodus
plagues.
in our Exodus saga.
Mm-hmm.
Because last week we covered the flies,
The pestilence
yeah,
and boils.
yeah, da boils,
The boils.
the flies, the pestilence, and the boils. And then this week we're covering the
And
remaining
also-
3.
But also kind of touched on Pharaoh's change of heart or beginning so it's starting to kind of get into more like bigger territory on what God's actually doing with the Egyptian people.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And there's a lot to cover
there's a lot to
On-
cover.
on so many things. Like this, there's so many different angles like to cover with the Exodus story. Like there's a lot going on in this story. This is like the keystone of the Israelite story.
Right.
Is their actual like covenant rescue
Mhm.
and all that. Like their whole religion from here on out centers around the Exodus.
Yeah, and well the Passover and the remembrance of like
Exactly.
this tangible view of like God literally bodily rescued us.
Yes.
And it's such a parallel to what's to come, right? Like
Yeah.
this idea of God rescuing us from evil.
yeah. And like what he has done in the form of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Like
Well, I'm saying like within the context of the Israelites 1,000 years ago, what he will do.
yeah, yeah.
Saying like, I mean, even though it was 2,000. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're on the same page. I think.
Yeah. So
I'm-
there's so much.
Loopy, you're drugged up. Let's
Yep.
go.
Yeah.
So
It's still the
it's still cold.
yeah. We'd like
Wow.
to say that this was recorded a week later from the previous one, but it was more recorded like 20 minutes later.
Yeah, we're gonna be straight up. We just recorded 2 back to back.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah, because we have lives.
Yes. and lives have been
That's the
crazy.
downside of not doing this for a living, is that we kind of have to figure out how to shoehorn it in around
Yeah.
everything else. So
Which, speaking of that, this would probably be a good time to like bring up our release schedule and like the changes that are going to be happening with that. So like some overall podcasty things to bring up real quick. I am, as the web developer of the group, am finally putting some work into the website. Mostly just trying to figure out what platform to do it on.
right.
And, how custom I want to build it, because I can build it custom, but even though I can do that, do I necessarily want to do that? So that's the question I'm wrestling with as a developer.
Yeah.
And then also, instead of trying to release weekly, which would be the preference, like, because Ben and I are pretty busy individuals and can sometimes like get caught up in life, we've decided to.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to add when you're done. I thought.
We decided to change the release schedule from weekly to bi-weekly.
Yep.
So every 2 weeks we will release an episode, or at least do our bestest to release an episode. And should in the future, if we just got a ton lined up and we're getting it and we're starting to record a lot, then we'll go back to weekly. Like, honestly, just because this isn't like our, income or anything, like it's kind of as we go, but we do want to have some form of consistency with it.
Right.
So from here, from henceforth, we will be releasing bi-weekly, and hopefully continuing on in that consistency. What do you want to say?
Yeah, no, sorry. It's just, I mean, part of it is like I travel a lot for work, so that does make it kind of difficult, because I think I'm actually there's a decent chance of maybe going to England in like a month. So, it might be good to kind of like backload some episodes, because I'm not sure how long I'm going to be out there. So
that'd probably be a good idea,
because we have a huge system we're sending out, and they need to install and training and stuff on how to use it. So, at some point, but yeah, so. Yes, so we're switching to bi-weekly. That being said, we're trying to figure out, it's like, okay, how do we balance? It's like, because this isn't our job,
This is for our love and joy.
We still want this to be a priority, right? But we're also like, at some point we have to be honest with ourselves. It's like, I don't think, like we also have our commitments, right? Like we have our jobs, we have our wives, because neither of us have children. You have a fur baby. I don't.
I have 2 fur babies.
You have 2 fur babies. I am not allowed to have a fur baby at my place, which is a huge bummer, because Jade needs a dog.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, anyway, so every 2 weeks.
Yep.
We're still trying to keep it. I would love to be able to continue to open more dialogue, so feel free to reach out to either of us.
That's another thing. Like, we should do more like online dialogue, like you were talking about, starting a subreddit, and a Discord and stuff like that. And I think that'd be great. Like, let's continue the conversation, like in the midst and all that.
Right.
Like, because I'm sure everybody listening to these episodes like has things they would love to say and like bring to the table, and that'd be awesome. Like, I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
So, like, let's just not have Ben and Levi chat about this stuff. Why don't we all chat about this stuff?
Yeah, like, this is the Bible being metal is not about, we don't want this to be like a sermon, right? Like, we don't be like, people come and they listen, they go, oh, that's kind of cool. And then they're like, talk about it. Let's talk about it,
Yeah.
I like a lot of the stuff is designed to spur discussion, I guess. This is actually something like me and Levi kind of talked about a little bit earlier this morning, but like this idea of that there's kind of like 2 main roles that we want this podcast to fulfill. One of which is to proclaim Jesus. Ultimately, the bottom line bedrock of this podcast is to proclaim Jesus and his truth.
Yeah.
That being said, I think a very important tenet of this is also kind of bringing to light, like, for people that don't really know much about the Bible, to look at this and be like, hey, this is actually kind of cool. This isn't just a bunch of corny, dumb stories, right?
Yeah.
So, and designed to kind of more spur conversation.
Yeah. Talk about the hard and gruesome questions that people have.
Right.
Or the people that they could tend to ignore those hard questions.
Right. Yeah, because I think God actually wants us to wrestle with this stuff. Because I think I mentioned this a little bit in the previous episode, but God, like, a lot of Christians do this poorly if they just say to shut up and have faith. I mean, I think God likes us to be able to wrestle with this. I think he wants us to be able to come to him knowing that what we believe is true and
Mhm.
not just something that was spoon-fed to us by another person. Because God has no grandchildren. Like, you have to be able to look at your relationship with the Lord and come to a conclusion yourself.
Mhm.
And hopefully we just kind of, spur some of that discussion along
Yeah.
based off of what we believe the truth of God to be.
Yeah.
So
Did you know that God is a pro wrestler?
that was such a out of left field.
Well, you were talking about wrestling with God, and I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, but Jacob beat him. He's like 0-1. He's not a very good pro wrestler.
Yeah, but it doesn't take much for him to touch his socket or touch his hip and have it pull out of socket.
Yeah, he's just like boop.
But like that's
God
the
wrestles dirty.
that's the meaning of Israel. That's the meaning of Israel's name, is that the one who wrestled with
The one
God.
who wrestled with God. And
Like,
it's like, and if we are
God's a wrestler.
right, and it's like, and
Nacho! Get those chips out of my face!
Did you tell him that they were the Lord's chips? Out of curiosity, how does your family feel about that movie? Because
Oh.
my swim coach was from Mexico. I loved her to death, but she hated that movie.
I love that movie.
I feel like it depends. Like, a lot of people from Mexico really love it and they think it's hilarious, and a lot of people from Mexico really hate it and they think it's like racist and dumb.
I'm sure everybody can get offended at anything,
Yeah.
but like one Mexican get offended at what brings me joy, and like honestly, he's allowed to be offended and I'm allowed to laugh. So you know,
I know. It just kind of justifies it for me when someone is like, "Yeah, I'm Mexican and I think it's freaking hilarious."
yeah.
Like,
Or
and
especially like in the office, some of my coworkers, like many of them are just white Utahns,
oh yeah.
and will often like look at me like, "Oh, I just made a Mexican joke. Is that okay? Is he offended?" And I'm over there busting up laughing because I thought it was the funniest thing they said.
Yeah, I mean that's actually something I've noticed is a lot of my Latino friends are like super big on like they love sarcastic, cutting, insulting humor. They think it's just the
Mhm.
greatest thing ever. So I think
Yeah.
it might just be a cultural thing.
Yeah, maybe.
Because Americans don't do sarcastic humor very well. They suck at it,
Mm.
which is a bummer to me because I love sarcastic humor, and people that get offended by my humor bum me out.
Yeah, and it's like I always want people to feel like they can be comfortable, and like
Right.
if people get offended, that I mean, you get offended, and,
Yeah.
and it's understandable why people get offended.
Mhm.
But like personally, I I just I don't care for much offense, like especially if it's not meant to be offending.
Right. Well,
Like
I mean,
if it's in
offenses.
good humor
Yeah.
and it's not meant to be a dig
Yeah.
at me, like if someone's intentionally doing it to dig at me, sure,
Yeah.
I can be offended.
Yeah.
But if it's never meant and I know the person's not meaning it to be a personal dig,
Mhm.
then sure, I'm going to laugh about it because it's probably true and it's probably funny.
Mhm.
Somebody once said, and I say this all the time, stereotypes are insensitive until they're true.
Yeah.
And that's so true about many of the Mexican jokes out there is they're insensitive until they're true.
Yeah.
And yeah, anyway,
Yeah. Anyway,
going
so,
off in left field there.
yeah, that was kind of out of. Neither of us are particularly what you would call politically correct, quote unquote.
Yeah, quote
But that
unquote.
being said, like, don't be a dick, please.
Yeah,
Like, it
realsies.
just like there. I'm all for humor, but if you're just trying to get a rise out of someone, that's just so not cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyway, moving on. So,
Anyway,
yeah,
all right. Duh
Yeah.
plagues.
duh plagues.
Cool. Dude,
So
start us
now-
off, man.
Now we are on Newt. We can actually,
Newt.
and he is Newt.
Newt.
We are not calling him Nut.
Okay, we will call him Newt.
So this plague was, everyone says hail rained down in the form of fire. I think that's a massive overdistillation. I personally believe, after looking at the text, that it wasn't fire. I don't think like literal fire rained down from heaven. I think it was just a giant hailstorm and lightning caused fires. Because they mention fire, but then it's always hail and thunder and rain, like for the rest of the passage. So I think it was just lightning. Because lightning is, I mean, for all intents and purposes, lightning could be an early, like even before 400 or 500 years ago, people look at lightning and be like, it's fire from heaven. Like, it's just because lightning's freaky. It's weird. Like, if you don't know what it is, it's terrifying. These giant crackling white lights that make noise and cause fires, and like lightning's terrifying, So
Yeah, I don't know.
Or do you like the image of God literally
I like the
burning
image.
hail?
I think we
falling from the
both.
earth?
I think one thing I made clear when we started this is that I am definitely a fire and brimstone type person.
Yes.
Like, so I have no problem with the image of like fiery hail. But then when you think about it, like, what is hail? Hail is ice.
It's water.
It's
like,
it's
you can't
water.
burn. I mean, God has burned water before.
Yeah.
Because he's God and he can do that.
But then like, I don't know. It's kind of hard because like, okay, so in verse 23 of the passage it says, "Then Moses stretched out his staff toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail and fire rain down to the earth."
Mm-hmm.
And so you have thunder, you have hail, and you have fire. And so, for all intents and purposes, it could have just been all three.
Yeah.
Like, it could have just been hail and fire.
Yeah.
Like, the musical group Earth, Wind, and Fire? See,
you remember what day it was yesterday, right? Do you remember the 21st night of September? That's Earth, Wind, and Fire, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, it is.
okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't about to get a bunch of really angry hate mail.
No,
Okay.
totally. Yeah, so, like, honestly, I think it was all three.
Okay.
Like, I'm of
Anyway.
the opinion, but that's just my opinion.
Nasty, gross hailstorm.
Yep.
Fire was involved.
Fire was involved in some way. Yep. Like thunder, lightning.
You were making so many references I just do not know.
I took a 70s song and turned it into Metallica. Like thunder!
Like thunder!
Yeah!
Yeah! Remember the Saint Anger snare? This is so...
no. Don't even bring that up. There's so much shame involved in that. I remember listening to that for the first time.
So bad.
Not only was the snares like the worst part of that album, but the song was awful.
It's like
I thought the song was awful. How it went from like fast and loud and thrash and heavy to like Saint Anger around my neck, like like Lars, what were you thinking, man?
Well, it was like we wanted something different. I'm like, it was different, all right.
Oh yeah.
Different does not mean good. Just full on, full stop.
Exactly.
Different does not mean
does
good.
not mean good.
I'd like to find bands that are different. I like to find bands that are different and good. That was subtext. I don't want bands that are just different.
No hate to anybody out there that loved Saint Anger. I know there are fans of Saint Anger.
Well, I don't. I think they're more fans of Metallica than.
True. There are Metallica fanboys, and that's okay.
And everything that Metallica puts out, they're just like, oh my god, it's an instant classic. And
just like the suckle of the teat of Metallica.
And like, it's so bad.
It was so bad.
Like Saint Anger, like the snare is objectively bad. Like it rings out. It's jarring. It's uncomfortable to listen to. It's bad.
The bass drum too. It sounded like
that. I was too distracted by the snare. I'm listening to that. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
It sounded like somebody just slapping a paper sack. It was just like,
well, it's like if I sit there and smack my belly, like
that's pretty much what it sounded like. It was awful.
So bad.
Anyway,
where are we? We're all over the place.
All over the place. I think that's what makes this fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was fire involved in this hailstorm.
Okay, and then this one, and if you guys have been in like a major hailstorm, I don't know if you guys remember this, but
we had hail yesterday.
We did have hail yesterday.
We did,
and it was kind of scary.
It was gnarly. There was a lot.
Yeah, but anyway, so like when my mom was a kid, my mom grew up in Colorado. And when my mom was a kid, there was this nasty hailstorm in the 70s. I don't remember. It was kind of legendary in Colorado for this reason, but like the hail was so bad, it damaged it shattered windows, it destroyed cars, like all kinds of stuff. And I'd be like driving around and I see all these cars from it was the 80s. I think it was the 80s. I'm driving around, we're driving around in Denver, and we're seeing all these cars with golf ball dents all over them. And my mom was like, and it's consistent, like all of them are like these old 80s cars, but they all have these dents. I'm like, what is this? She goes, oh, there's this hailstorm back in the 80s, and it destroyed all these cars, and the dealers just got rid of them for super, super cheap because they were ugly now. They look like a golf ball. So so it was just hail will destroy things. Like it's just. Like all the hail I've ever seen, like it never gets any bigger than like an airsoft BB.
Yeah.
Like the biggest I've ever seen hail personally. But I know like there's some hailstorms where it's like baseball sized chunks of ice falling from the sky.
Yeah.
Right.
Like we've all seen the videos on YouTube of people just chillaxing at the beach, and all of a sudden, hailstorm comes along,
Right.
and it's just pelting everyone.
Yeah.
People
And
getting knocked out, people getting welts.
yeah, like
Yeah.
hail's scary.
It's no joke.
Well, I mean, and then this was big hail too, so it's
Yeah.
destroying crops. It's like it's hurting people. There's fire everywhere, so things are like catching on fire. Like, but it's just it was probably like this is a different. This is kind of like where am I going with this? This is like a very when people think of like the wrath of God, this is very much the picture that people see is like just unmitigated, unrelenting destruction.
Mhm.
Like, and this is one of the Nut, the goddess of the sky.
Mhm.
God is taking over the sky and basically raining destruction from the sky on the Egyptians.
Yeah.
Like, just basically saying it was like I control the sky more than your gods, your
Yeah.
puny, dumb gods.
Yep.
You know. So
I wanted to touch on verse 20.
Mhm.
It said, "Then whoever feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh hurried his slaves and his livestock into the houses. But whoever did not pay attention to the word of the Lord left his slaves and his livestock in the field." So
Mhm.
this is one of the first instances mentioned where Egyptians took to heart what Moses said, and they were like, "Wait a minute, like Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has proved himself, to stick by his word. When he says tomorrow this is going to happen, it happens.
Mhm.
Now there's actually life-threatening, like hail about to come, and if you left whatever's left of your livestock out in the fields, you left your servants out there, whatever, it's going to get pelted. They're going to get pelted and they're going to die.
Mhm.
Like, and it says that then whoever feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh.
So these are people like in the court,
Yeah.
in the royal that are starting to be like, you know what, the Pharaoh don't got this.
Yeah.
Like,
So here we see the faith in Pharaoh starting to wean,
Mhm.
like big time.
Right, and this actually may have like contributed to why Pharaoh became more and more maniacal about maintaining this control, right? Because he's like, oh, people are starting to lose faith. I
Mhm.
need to step up my game. Like, I don't know. Like, I think there's a lot that kind of goes into that, but this is where we're starting to see it's like the Egyptians are kind of going like, ah, hell nah.
Oh hell no!
Ah, hell nah. They're backing out. They're like, we're done. Like,
Yep.
we're tapping out. We're not
Yeah.
gonna play these games anymore. You know.
Yeah.
We're gonna listen to God because they're seeing it's like this God is more powerful.
Yeah.
You know, it's like maybe they still believed that their pantheon existed, but they saw this more powerful God and are like, we are going to listen to what he says.
Yeah. And like at this point, it's important to remember that at the end of all this, when when the Hebrews finally leave Egypt, there are some Egyptians that leave with them.
Right.
Like some people flat out lost all faith in the Egyptian system and they left
With the Hebrews, yeah.
Yeah, and they basically became their slaves. They're like, "We will go with you. We will be your servants. We will be your people." Or
Just get us out of here.
just get us out of here.
Right.
Your God is obviously more powerful. And
Mhm.
these are probably amongst some of them, some of the people in the
Right.
court that were like, "Look, Pharaoh, he failed us, and your God is clearly powerful." And so
Mhm.
this right here is the start of some of the Egyptians just flat out like, "Hey, Pharaoh ain't got this."
Right. I mean, and that is we're finally starting to come full circle as to why does God do this, right? Kind of going back to this idea of God is always on the path that will bring the most people to Him.
Yeah.
Within the framework of I mean, depending on what you think about predestination or versus like free will, how much of that we actually have, that's just a whole other can of worms that we don't even have. I think we could honestly have an entire podcast
Yeah.
dedicated to
That's a hard question that we should tackle.
should tackle, but there are better resources out there than us.
True,
So-
true. But start the conversation.
Sorry,
you know?
yeah. So,
So
it's
like in another episode, like let's totally start that
yeah,
conversation
absolutely.
and get
So,
it going.
but anyway, yeah. But we're getting to this idea of like, how else would God have been able to show Himself to the hearts of the Egyptians, other
Yeah.
than tear down everything else that they have?
Yeah.
You know, and but then we're getting to the point where it's like from a standpoint of like but on principle, why does God have to do that with such destruction and loss of life? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, in this day and I mean, that's a question I think you should ask yourself. It's like in this day and age, what would it take for God to touch you,
Yeah.
to really talk to you,
Mm-hmm.
for you to not just write it off as a bad dream,
Yeah.
or for you to not just write it off? Like He would have to tear down the one thing. Like if we had something in our life blocking us from God, God would have to tear that away before He could really talk to us.
Yeah.
You know.
That's
Um,
true. Like the Exodus story, like I said, like there's so many facets to this story, and that's definitely one of them. Is that this right here, God is providing the ultimate opportunity to the Egyptians as well to come to Him as their God as well,
mhm,
to turn and repent from their idolatry, to turn to the one true God, and like He is showing Himself to be more than sufficient, more than powerful, more than providing.
mhm.
You know, God clearly takes care of the people that He calls distinct. The
Well, not only that, but then He warns people too. Like
Yeah.
he's not just like murdering. He's like, hey, I'm going to do this. If you believe me, no harm will come to you. You
Yeah.
know, and that becomes a common theme for the next several plagues.
Yeah.
He goes, if you believe me, if you have faith in me, no harm will come to you. You
Yeah.
know?
Like if you follow the thing, or
Mhm.
if you take heed, basically, if
I'm
you
more,
take heed.
yeah, take heed. That I mean, not only that, it's like if you don't do this thing, I won't punish you. Like that, I don't want you to take that away from this conversation. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, but in this particular instance, where God's like, I'm going to do this big thing to show my power and my wrath and my judgment.
Mm-hmm.
If you want if you want my hand to stay against your house, just do as I say.
Yeah.
He gives them opportunities to say, "Yep, we believe you. We're good. Like
Mm-hmm.
we will listen to you."
Yeah.
You know?
But like going back to what you mentioned about like what would it take for, any person, what is the roadblock? What is the I guess the God in their life that God would have to tear down in order for them to have that opportunity to receive Him and to
Right.
see Him as
Mhm.
the one true God? Like many people who provide their testimony on how they came to God, that's usually the start of it. They're like, I had this thing in my life. I was so focused on this in my life. There was this God in my life, and God had to take that away from me in order for me to realize my need for Him.
Right.
Otherwise they don't see a need. They're like, I have this thing, or I have that thing, or I
Right.
have wealth, health, happiness, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then once God takes that away, and like even Michelle and I,
Right.
we've experienced that in our own life. God has taken things away in our life so that we can recognize our absolute need for Him and
Right.
dependence on Him. And like that's just how God works. He's
Yeah.
gonna take the God out of your life and show Himself to be the only sufficient God that you need.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that and it gets scary, right?
Yeah,
Because
it
like
does.
when you look into the implications of that, because if you're looking at like my life right now, I'm happy, you know. I have a good wife, I have a good job, you know, and all of this could be taken away from me in an instant.
Hmm.
Um, but like it's really easy for someone to say, "Oh, my God was drugs," or my God was porn, or my God was the love of money, or it's like something where it's like, "Oh, from a worldly standpoint, this is inherently bad." But if you say, "My God was security,"
Hmm.
my God was
My wife,
my wife, my
yeah.
God was
My
this,
children,
my children, like
yeah.
all of these things where it's like these aren't necessarily bad, but they're still getting in the way
Yeah.
of they're still like really blocking you from being able to experience the fullness of God.
Hmm.
It's like, and I wouldn't go so far as to say I don't think, because this goes against the character of God. I don't think God would like murder your family. I mean, He did with Job, which is also just opens up a whole other can of worms.
Yeah. So
But He wasn't using it to get to Job. He was actually using, because like if me and Timo actually had a conversation about this, because Job was arguably one of the most godly men in the Bible,
yeah.
where he lost everything, and
Hmm.
still he said, "God, I will praise you."
Yeah.
Like not many of us could say we would do the same.
Yeah.
Um,
Arguably, yeah.
and that's something where it's like, where if I was Job's son, right? If I had the faith of Job as one of Job's children, right? And then I, was murdered by bandits,
Hmm.
but I realized that I would like, imagine I went up to heaven and I'm having a conversation with God, and I'm like, why'd you do that? I
Yeah.
was happy, And God's like, because I know for a fact that this was the only way that I could get the story out. Like you dying and showing the faith of God to be an inspiration to billions of people in the years to come. I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
Because this life really ultimately is peanuts compared to
Mm-hmm.
what awaits us in eternity, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. The grand scheme of things, we take our lives way too seriously and think our lives to be way more important than they actually are.
right.
And like, yes, human life is valuable. It
Right.
absolutely is, but that's only because we are in the image of God.
Right. I mean, we don't want you to say that life has no purpose, because
Yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
think
Well, it has purpose because we're in the image of
yeah,
God.
because we are the image of God. Like, God gave us this amazing ability to create,
Yeah.
and this ability to love and build a relationship, and it's like there's so much value to be had in this life,
Mm-hmm.
but it should not be the end goal,
Yeah.
right? Um, I don't know. It's just there's a lot there where it's like, if we look at our lives as like the most important thing, I think it's really hard for us to see the big picture, because
Mm-hmm.
for us is like, oh God, I cut your life short on Earth by 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
but it had a bigger purpose and it brought more people to me. I would like to believe that someday I would have the faith to be okay with that
Mm-hmm.
if God did that to me.
Yeah.
You know.
Like, what is our life? Our life is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
It's an absolute gift. And the minute we start to decide that that is like our right, like we have the right to live, that's when I feel like we can lose that aspect of it being a
Right.
gift. Like every moment, every breath, every time my heart pumps blood to my brain, that is an absolute gift. And
Mhm.
I have no right to that in a
Yeah.
sense, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I don't
but,
know. That just got really, really deep. All
and
of a
that's
sudden.
good, man.
That's good.
Sometimes we
Oh,
got to
it's
do
so
it.
good. Yeah.
What's our tagline? We talk about the hard and gruesome stuff.
The hard. And this is one of those things that's hard.
It's
you
hard.
know? It's like admitting it's like my life on Earth. It's not meaningless, but it doesn't have the value I attribute it to it
Yeah.
now. You know.
But even then, like,
Mhm.
okay, say you were to die way sooner than you wanted to,
Mhm.
and to you or me that would seem like, oh man, like that's a huge waste. But really,
Mhm.
that could be because of how much purpose was behind that,
Mhm.
like God's intentionality behind that, and your life was meant to serve that purpose. That means
Mhm.
your life fulfilled the absolute purpose that it was meant to fulfill,
Mhm.
which is the most fulfilling thing you could have ever done.
Right.
you know? And so, like, sure, you didn't get to live an extra 50 years, but if you already fulfilled the purpose of your life at age 25 in
Right.
the grand scheme of God's, amazing plan for our existence,
Mhm.
dude, you fulfilled it.
You made it.
You made it. You're
And
done.
it's like, and there's joy to be found in that, even though
Yeah,
it's like, but then it's just death is scary when
it
people think
is.
about it. It's like, because none of us can know,
Yeah.
can really, really, really know. It's like I have faith that death is not the end.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, every time, like I remember when my grandpa died, like I was, it kind of hurt, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a terrible relationship with him growing up, because he was mean, he was bossy. Whenever like I was never able to connect with him until I was about 20 years old, and I was like, yeah, like I was finally getting to the point where it's like, hey, like I know my grandfather, because he was a mechanical engineer, so like
Mm.
the first positive experience I had with him, we were sitting on the porch, we were just we were just whining about engineering professors and homework and stuff, and I had this moment click where I had like the solidarity with my grandfather, and I was so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, after 20 years, I'm finally able to start connect with him, and he died 3 weeks later,
Wow.
and I was just like, I was heartbroken, because I'm like, I finally am able to. I thought I was gonna finally be able to have a relationship with this man,
Yeah.
and I never was able to, and
Yeah.
it's like a lot of that sadness was that fear of like, am I going to ever see him again?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if he ever accepted Christ before his death, but even then, it's like it really casts into doubt. I was like, am I sure about this?
Mm.
Even if he put his fear in God, does it matter?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
It
Like,
makes
and
you
it's
think.
it's scary, Like
Yeah.
death is scary, and it's okay to, like, whenever someone dies, to not to be sad and to be broken that you don't have that time with them. That's
Yeah.
okay. Like, we're not trying to say it's like, oh, you'll just see them later, so don't be sad. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and no, like death hurts, and death
Yeah.
is scary, and it's
Yeah.
sad, and there's so much there, and that just there's this weird juxtaposition where it's like, if you fulfill your purpose and then you die
Yeah.
here on Earth, that still comes with loss,
Yeah.
with great loss from the people who are still here, and that just it's really really easy to let that loss color God's plan.
Yeah.
So
Like you brought up your grandpa,
Mhm.
right? He's your grandpa.
yeah, it's my grandpa, my mom's dad.
Yeah. So like, kind of similar when you're talking about like it's oh we want to be happy because we're gonna see them in heaven someday,
Right.
kind of thing. Like it's funny because like in my family, my dad's side of the family, our family is the epitome of have a party when someone dies
Mm-hmm.
because we want to celebrate their life.
Yeah.
And like I think that's great. I think that's an amazing part of our family culture.
Yeah.
But like in the midst of that, there's very obvious like, yes, we're here, we're having fun. Like for example, my uncle passed away recently.
Mm-hmm.
Remember?
Yeah, I remember.
My dad's brother, he passed away recently, and it was we had the service in the morning, and then we went and immediately had our party.
Right.
And at the party, yes, everybody was having a great time. We were laughing, we were playing music, and like it's a memorable moment for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But man, you could just see there were people crying there. Everybody was brokenhearted.
Mm-hmm.
It was great that we got to see each other. And one of the common things we all said is like, why don't we get together like this more often for good reasons?
Right.
Like it felt like every time we got together is because someone died.
Yeah.
Why can't we just have more family reunions where we like get back together and reunite
Right.
instead of, oh, someone died, I guess we're about to go have our family reunion,
Mm-hmm.
and it just sucked. It was like, why don't we see each other more often?
Yeah.
Why don't we make that point?
Yeah, it's
And there's
just
that dual sadness but happiness. And
yeah, and it's so easy for us to like, and for us here on Earth when someone passes away, for us to just go, it's like, why did God take them, or why did they, why did they leave so early? Because my cousin died of cancer, same family, same side of the family, my mom's nephew.
mm-hmm.
He died of cancer and he was 20.
Yeah.
And he was just the kindest, most amazing, friendliest, fun. He was so funny. He's one of those people you're around and it's like your day just gets better by being with him. And he got a variety of lung cancer that 70-year-old men who smoked all their lives got, and metastasized throughout his body in like 3 months, and he died. That was it. It was gone. And it just, that impacted me more than my grandfather's death did, because my grandfather's was like, I felt that loss of finally getting a relationship, even though he was like 85, his time had come, but then my cousin Park, like when he died, he was 20. Like I'm older than he I lived more life, but I feel like I didn't live more life because like the stuff he accomplished on this, like he was an artist, he was a very, very accomplished artist, and like he made art that like touched people's lives, and he did art for people, and then he was gone, and it's like, wow, that feels like such a waste, because he could have gone the rest of his life and continued to just make amazing art, you know, and so it's just weird, like having to deal with this idea of like, what was God's plan in this,
and that every single one of them, all the people that we just brought up, their purpose,
what was
this ocean of life,
right?
Their droplets in this ocean of life fulfilled the purpose. Like, no matter how short or long it was,
right?
Like, the purpose was fulfilled,
right? So yeah, it's just it's hard, man. Talking about this stuff is not easy, because sometimes death is part of God's process.
Yep.
And it's really hard for us humans to see that, because life is all we know.
Yeah. All we want to pay attention to also.
I mean, because we hear stories like, oh, this happens, when we die, but none of us, because when you die, it's not like you can go there and come back.
Yeah.
Right? Like
it's not like coming back from a vacation.
No, it's not. It's like, dude, it's like when I went to Hawaii with my wife, which is great, by the way. Hawaii is amazing.
Yeah.
But like, it was paradise. It was warm. It was peaceful. Like you hear the ocean. Like it was wonderful. And then we come back and we got to tell people about it.
Yeah. Then
when someone dies, there's always that what if. It's like, what if,
Yeah.
It's not like they can come back and talk to us. And it's just,
they from here forward know more about God than we do.
Yeah. And it's so hard for us to look at death and be like, how can this be part of God's plan? Because for us, death is the end. Like even for very, very devout Christians, every single one of them will always go sit at a funeral and weep because of the loss. Like, because life is all we know.
Jesus wept
at the death of his friend.
Yeah.
And it's like,
even though he knew the grand picture way more than we did.
Yeah.
And yet even he wept.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So that was Interesting.
So
Yeah.
we
Anyway.
that's the end of talking about the locusts.
No, no, it's
Or no,
hail.
the hail. Okay,
Yeah.
now we're on to the locusts.
Locusts. Wow, that took a really dark turn.
All
Anyway,
right, awesome. This
yeah.
is the Bible is metal.
This is the Bible is metal because it is. Like
Yep.
we want to talk about this stuff.
Yep. This is the
So
hard
we
and
don't
difficult
want to.
truths.
We don't want to avoid any of these difficult
Yeah.
realities. You know.
So plague 8, the 8th plague, the locusts.
The locusts.
Do you
the
remember?
Locusts.
Wait, I brought this up before, but you remember the locusts plague that happened in Vegas recently?
Yes.
Dude,
Oh.
that was pretty intense.
Yeah.
I was watching the video of that, and I have 2 cousins and an aunt that live in Vegas, and you know I don't know if I saw any of their pictures, but I saw a bunch of pictures from other people that I know in Vegas, and you look up at night at the lights, like the light poles, and just swarms around the lights,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
so
I've
much
s-
so
I've
that
seen
you
the
can
YouTube-
hardly see the lights.
Yeah, I've seen the videos and it's just like
Yeah.
ew.
The streets
And
are
people are like
covered.
driving and you can like hear them like
Yeah.
oh, it's just
And you're just running them over.
Oh, so gross.
People's grills were very gross.
Oh, it's just
after
nasty,
that.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, locusts are gross. Well, I mean, and also the thing that was about this is it wasn't so much about the locusts because the hail destroyed all the Egyptian crops.
Yeah.
So this actually would have been a little bit later in the harvest season because at this point the wheat and the spelt, it's actually mentioned by name in the Bible. It's like the wheat and the spelt grow later. And the locusts came and ate the wheat and the spelt.
Yep.
So basically God is like, I'm going to destroy your food source. But then they're like, oh, well, we have another harvest. And God's like, well, I'm going to destroy that too.
Yeah. So some time
So-
passed.
Yeah, so some time had passed, possibly several months.
And I think that's something we didn't touch on is
Yeah.
that these plagues didn't happen like day after day.
yeah.
This wasn't like, oh, this all was accomplished in like 7 days.
Mhm.
Like, no, this was accomplished over the span of months, potentially even years.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we really know for sure.
Yeah.
Do you know what if there's a consensus on how long?
I don't
this
remember
period
reading about a consensus on it, but I do know for a fact that it did take place over a span of months.
Months. It
Like-
would have been several months. you
Yeah.
know? I
'Cause
mean, one
that-
after the other would have just been. I think there were a couple that were within a week or so of each other, but like
yeah, because even then,
even
like,
if they're a week apart, that's still 3 months.
yeah, because
so-
like, how many times do these plagues say, oh, it killed all the livestock?
Yeah.
But if all the livestock just died yesterday, how are all the livestock going to die again?
Yeah.
Like, clearly, livestock died. The Egyptians probably snagged some of the livestock from Israel,
Yeah.
and then they build up their livestock again.
Yeah.
You know, somehow. I don't know. But then
Yeah.
livestock dies again.
Yeah.
You know, so clearly there had to be lengths of time
Yeah.
between these plagues. Like,
Yeah.
they didn't all happen consecutively in the span of a couple weeks.
Yeah.
You know.
So,
So yeah, that was a good point.
Yeah. Anyway, so this will be sometime later. So in the harvest season, when they're like, okay, we got our grains again, and God says through Moses, let my people go so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I'll bring locusts into your country tomorrow. They'll cover the face of the ground so that it cannot be seen. They will devour what little you have left after the hail, including every tree that is growing in your fields. They will fill your houses and those of all your officials and all the Egyptians, something neither your parents nor your ancestors have ever seen from the day they settled in this land until now.
Yeah.
So he's just going like, this will destroy everything you have left.
Yep.
Like, just. And then Pharaoh's officials said to him, how long will this man be a snare to us? Let the people go, so that they may worship the Lord their God. Do you not yet realize that Egypt is ruined?
Please. Help.
So then Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. Go worship the Lord your God, he said, but tell me who will be going. Moses answered, we will go with our young and our old, with our sons and our daughters, with our flocks and our herds. That's not an R. Because we were to celebrate a festival to the Lord. The Pharaoh said, the Lord be with you if I let you go along with your women and children. Clearly you are bent on evil. No, have only the men go and worship the Lord, since that's what you've been asking for.
Yeah.
No, notice Pharaoh's doing it again. He's like,
Yeah.
he's bargaining. He's like,
Yeah.
let me, I'm going to try to control this situation. It's like, no, just take the men.
Yeah. And distorting it too.
He needs to be he's distorting the truth. He's like, this is what you've been asking for all along, right? Is the men to go and worship the Lord? He's like,
No.
no. He's like, let us go. Like,
Yeah, everybody.
everybody.
The whole clan, yo.
The whole, we're bringing all the posse.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna bring everyone. So it's like, and Pharaoh's like trying to like, he's like, wait, don't you remember saying that? Like he's like manipulating them and like trying to
Yeah.
get them to do what he wants, you know.
Yeah.
And then clearly, like Pharaoh's just he's in denial. It's like
Mhm.
I'm God, and then God's like, no, you're not, and he's like, yes, I am, yeah, and like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like, so this particular god was Set, the god of storms and disorder.
Yeah.
Basically just destruction, and a storm of locusts, such that your ancestors have never seen before. Right.
Your grandpappy's gonna feel this one.
Yeah. You just go look at it and go like, oh, yeah, this is new. So it's just something where it's like this, like the significance of that is like this cannot be attributed to anything
Mhm.
but God, right? Hailstorm, sure. I'm sure they've gotten nasty hailstorms before, you know.
Yeah.
And big thunderstorms and stuff. Because in the desert, you'll get monsoons. Like it's all kinds of monsoons are scary, by the way.
Yeah.
If you've ever been in one. But it's like, and all of this, like, and like frogs and blood and like a lot of this stuff. It's like if you really wanted to stretch, you'd be like, oh, it's just a freak, like freak of nature accident, because sometimes this stuff just happens, you know.
Yeah.
But he's like, you will see this. It will be worse than anything your ancestors have ever seen before. Like something that's like, this is the hand of God making this move, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then Pharaoh's just like, well, I'm bigger God than he is, so yeah. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
And what's also interesting about this one is that, like, I remember watching the History Channel like view and the scientific view of like the plagues, and how sure, like, logically you can deduce that the reason why gnats and flies came about. You're right there.
I just dropped this on my.
Yeah, like the reason why gnats and flies showed up was because of the frogs, and like of course they showed up because they're eating the frogs, and just all these like scientific answers for why the plagues happened in the order that they happened. The weird thing about this one though is there is no scientific logical reason why locusts would appear after an event like the hail and all that.
Right.
Like there's no scientific reason for that.
Right.
Like the text says that an east wind blew. Like just a big east wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's actually, because doesn't it usually go? Like, I don't know about Africa. I know here in Utah, the predominant weather pattern is west to east.
Yeah.
It'd be like if we have wind coming from over the mountains instead of over the desert, which would be super, super weird.
Yeah.
Like people wouldn't want to, like it would totally mess up our weather and stuff like that. So,
and I'm not sure like what
yeah.
I'm not sure like what the normal pattern was, but
Yeah.
the text says it was a big east wind that
Yeah.
blew all night, and by the time they woke up, like locusts are here all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And like they're just swarming. They're in their houses. It says they're in their beds. They're eating up all that's what's left of the vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
They're just it's a huge like swarm. Like
Mm-hmm.
and there's no reason for them to be here other than the hand of God. Like
Mm-hmm.
just a regular Egyptian looking at this be like, wow, this has to be the hand of God. There's no reason for them to be here otherwise.
Yeah. No, and this is actually and this is a comment I found online that I thought was pretty interesting. The eighth plague issued by the Lord had an even greater purpose than all the others. It was to be felt so that Pharaoh would tell his sons and his sons' sons the mighty things of the Lord. To the point where it's like, this would be like a story handed down through the generations of like, hey, this is what the God of the slave people did.
Mm.
When like, just like to that level where it's like, we can't not talk about this even deep into our old age. So anyway, yeah. Do you have any other thoughts or?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. We'll finally get to the last one that we're gonna do as just kind of like what we call the warm up plagues.
Yeah.
Some of these don't feel like the warm up plagues, but
this is the last one of our like normal plagues. The final last plague is kind of the big-in that we want to devote a whole episode to.
right.
And then we have other things we want to touch on as well, along those lines. But yeah, so this is the last like warm-up plague to the final end. This is like the climax is coming, but
Yeah.
this is not quite the climax yet. But it's a
Yeah.
big one.
Yeah.
So this is the plague of darkness. And you want to touch on the
Yeah, so the god here, so this is one that everyone's actually heard of, but
Yeah.
Ra was like
Ah,
think Zeus. He was the god of the sun. Like
Yeah.
a lot of ancient cultures worshiped the sun because it was, there.
yeah,
And for someone who doesn't know what a star is, it's pretty easy to look at the sun and say, "Oh, the sun's watching over us. The sun gives us life. The sun brings us like warmth and crops and
Yeah.
light and like." So for a lot of people, the sun god was like the penultimate of their pantheon. Like so in this case, God is actually actively saying the strongest god besides Pharaoh himself, I am going to blot him from existence
yeah,
for 3 days.
yeah. Blot. That's a good one.
Yeah, it was just like
Good way to say it.
just like he was a stain. He's just like zoop.
Yeah.
And you look at like the sun, and even in like the funny thing is, even in like in astronomical terms, the sun is not a big star. It's actually kind of small.
Yeah.
It's a small little puny star. It's not
Yeah.
a big one. But then we look at the sun, and it's just this massive writhing ball of flame.
Yeah.
It's just kind of cool. But then God just kind of like, nope, boop, like
Yeah. And the crazy thing about this one is that this, like, again, going back to the whole scientific reasoning behind these plagues, is that this wasn't just an eclipse. Like,
Mhm.
there's people that will say, "Oh, this was just one of those freak eclipses that happened."
Mhm.
The thing about that, though, is an eclipse affects large it affects the entirety of the side of the Earth
right,
that the sun is touching.
right.
But this was centralized to only the city of Ramses, only the city where the Egyptians are, because it says that the land in Goshen,
Yeah.
nothing.
There was light.
There was
Yeah.
light. It was fine. Everything was fine. In fact, just like we brought up in the last episode, the distance from the land of Goshen to Ramses is about 15 miles. And so the Egyptians, or the Israelites, can see in the distance this black shroud over the land of Egypt.
Right.
It's
And
just
vice versa.
darkness.
Like
Yeah,
potentially, but because of how light works, like they may have been able to see the land of Goshen from Egypt and seen the light.
potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah.
I mean that's how they portray it in the Prince of Egypt movie,
Mhm.
and I think that's very poignant because then the Egyptians would look out, and I think that's the importance is I think they would have to be able
Yeah.
to see that because otherwise it wouldn't mean anything to them,
Yeah.
right? Because they look out and they see that the place where the Israelites live,
Mhm.
there's still light there,
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah, like this is clearly like light has been stripped of this area,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very specific to this area, again, to make that distinction so that they would know, okay, our god Ra, he's the god of light, he's the god of the sun, and that brings us, life, that brings us warmth and all that stuff. But here Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has stripped just our plot of land of its light.
Yeah.
That this God has power over light. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's intense when you think of it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I'm getting like stoner, like, dude, with it,
Yeah.
but like that's so intense to
Well-
think that light was stripped from that area.
Well, have you ever been in a place where it's just black? Like, have you ever been in a cave where
Yeah.
they turn the lights off on you?
Yeah,
And it's so dark, you can almost like taste it and feel it. Like it's just
yeah,
the fear. Because when you don't have light, when you don't see anything, your brain will start to manufacture
yeah,
like things you see.
yeah,
Like not having any light whatsoever will drive you insane.
yeah,
Like it's kind of it's scary because humans like when you have fear of the dark, you aren't actually scared of the dark, you're just scared of what's in it.
yeah,
And when you can't see anything, it makes your imagination go haywire.
yeah,
And so it's like there is this one went so far as like not only to strip Ra of any of his power, but was also probably because there's some plagues that grossed you out. There are some plagues that made you vomit. This one was one of the ones that made you fear
yeah,
the Lord probably more than any other plague.
yeah,
So
yeah,
just like a pure unadulterated terror because of just the sheer numb blackness that would have covered the land.
yeah.
Like that's terrifying to think
Mhm.
about. Like being in a
Yeah.
place like have you ever played like Outlast or something like that?
Oh my gosh.
And you need like a
yeah,
flashlight and
Yeah.
just a flashlight. It's like that's not enough light. I'm
Yeah.
terrified. But you had no light.
Yeah,
It would have just been black. That would have been terrifying.
Yeah.
That would have been terrorizing. Like it just like legitimately unabashedly terrifying.
yeah. which is again going back to the whole like the character of God. That yes, God is a God of light, and He is the light. He is the pure light. But God is also the God of absolute darkness. He's the God that controls the absence of light.
Mm-hmm.
He can strip light as He so chooses.
Mm-hmm.
And like, when we think of what darkness is, it's just the absence of light. It's not
Right.
an actual entity or anything.
It can feel like it sometimes, though.
It can. It totally can. But like with that, it's I can picture the Hebrews looking at the land of Ramses and just seeing just this black cloud. Like you remember in Breath of the Wild,
Oh yeah.
yeah, when you're coming over to that area and there's just this black shroud over that little area.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that. It's just this black shroud over the land of Egypt.
Yeah.
And you can't see into it. You can probably barely see out of it,
Yeah.
because like you said, you kind of had to at least at some point. Some Egyptian is probably walking the border, coming out of the darkness into the light and seeing, oh wow, there's an actual border to this darkness. It's not just an eclipse.
Right.
Like that right there shows even more how powerful and how God can contain where He chooses to strip light.
Right. And that's it's just God has ultimate 100% authority, because we look at light, and light's one of those things where it's like we know a lot about it, but it's like light does what it wants.
Yeah.
Trying to, like, especially any photographer would know this. It's like trying to manipulate light and control it. If we get cracks, like, we have to very carefully contain what we can do. Like, light does what it wants, and we can block it. We can kind of like, we can bend it, we can move it around and maneuver it to what we want. But light ultimately is like we can't take something that emits light and make it not emit light.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, without, like, I mean, obviously, like a light bulb you can turn off, but like,
Yeah.
but like something, there's just but God has ultimate control over that.
Yeah. That He could strip light where He chooses.
And yeah, so it's just, there's this last plague of darkness, and someone, this is another quote from the same website I've been stealing all my notes from. But let's see, where is it? Okay, so the Lord showed that He had control over the sun as a witness that the God of Israel had ultimate power over life and death. Because the sun is like life, right?
Yeah.
The sun brings you crops, it brings you light, it brings you warmth. It is light, and that's another question, is like, did it get cold because there was no sunlight on it?
Yeah.
The psychological and religious impact this would have had a profound influence on the Egyptians at this point. Darkness was a representation of death, judgment, and hopelessness. A complete absence of light. And it's like, and maybe like there's like, I think people can have a tendency to read too far into this, but I think the biggest thing is God just is like, I have the ultimate power here.
Yep. Do
not mess with me.
Yo.
Right. Like, and this is one where it's like, I don't think the plague of darkness, like, hurt anyone.
Yeah.
I think this is just fear, and made people, like, this was like the final, like, dooms, like, when you hear dawn of the final day in Majora's Mask, right? It's like that last little thing where you're just like, oh crap. Like, he's not playing game. Like, there's something that's weirdly profound about this one versus the hailstorm, right?
Yeah.
Because the hailstorm is like, oh, it's like nature, but this is so unnerving and so unnatural that it's like, God's trying to get my attention, here.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of good.
So intense.
So intense.
Yeah. Just as Gordon Ramsay hates raw food, God hates the God of raw.
God hates the God of
raw. There's your dad joke for the day. That reminds me of that Family Guy episode of the snooty rich kid with the big jaw. Or no, not the one with the big jaw. The one whenever he laughs, he's like,
well, it's like whenever I, like, someone makes a dumb joke on, like, when I'm playing games online, I just kind of like, yeah.
Nice.
So,
all right.
Final thoughts. We're getting into these darknesses, and we're starting to see the Egyptians are just like, Pharaoh, let these people go. They will be the death of us.
Please.
If they already weren't, if they already weren't the death of us.
Mm-hmm.
And Pharaoh is so stubborn. And notice so Ra is the last most powerful god in the pantheon, except for Pharaoh himself. This last plague was designed to hit Pharaoh where it hurt, showing him that you are nothing
Mm.
compared to me, you know.
Mhm.
So that's what we're going to get into next week. Anyway.
Yes. Yes.
So
I'm
it'll
so
be so
excited.
good. So good.
Yep.
Or next 2 weeks.
Yeah, next 2 weeks.
Okay, sounds great. All right,
right.
cool. This is Ben.
And this is Levi.
This has been The Bible's Metal. Have a good week, guys.
Later.